I wanted to start by thanking the worship team for taking on that challenging song, and because that really was the inspiration for my message today. It's one of the most profound songs I've ever heard, and I just love it so much. Everybody has a title for their message. My title is The Sound of Light. Okay? Now, we all have heard speed of light. Speed of light is supposed to be something like 186,000 miles per second. When I try to make that real to my students, I would tell them, okay, I want you to look up and imagine there's a rocket going by overhead, okay? And that rocket is going at the speed of light. Okay, so I'm going to count 1 second. And I want you to imagine how many times that rocket will go over. Are you ready? Okay, 1,001. How many times did it go over? You know how many times? 7 times. It would circle the earth 7 times in 1 second. That's how fast the speed of light is. Okay, and the scientists tell us that's as fast as anything can go. Okay, but nobody's ever talked about what the sound of light is.
Good, great. Good, Mary.
And this message is kind of about that and about music. Last week, Pastor Sam, one of his points was, make worship your weapon. I'd like to add to that, make worship your door.
Oh, great.
Okay.
Good.
We know that singing songs of praise and worship, we feel it in this church every Sunday, how it moves us close to God, right into his presence. So that's basically what I'm going to talk about today. But I want to start by a confession. I'm basically a scientist, and that's not a dirty word. I mean, people... It's like, science is not the antithesis of God. It actually, if you understand it, it leads you to an understanding that there is no other answer than God created everything. Okay, and we'll start with, well, I always do with my students, the Big Bang. Now, the Big Bang, not those funny kids on TV, but the Big Bang was a theory that was, it was developed because they noticed Hubble, who invented that Hubble Space Telescope, he noticed that all the galaxies are moving away from each other. Okay, everything is moving away. And so with all their giant brains, they did all these calculations, extrapolating backwards. And they figured that, well, if everything's moving away from each other at this given speed, they all must have started at a single point. And they figured that point back to be about 14.5 billion years ago. And that's where they came up with this idea of the Big Bang. Here's where it falls apart. Okay? I will. The scientific theory says that at first there was an explosion so great that there was just the tiniest fragments of matter, and everything was flying out at 3 times the speed of light. Now, they already said speed of light as fast as you can go, but nobody bothers to say how to go 3 times the speed. And if everything's going at 3 times 186,000 miles per second, things are getting pretty far apart pretty fast, right? And these are just the tiniest particles, but then somehow they start getting together. You go, wait a minute. They're already, and that was after a few, I think they said a few million years, they started getting together by gravity and go, they're already too far apart. We should be nothing but chaos, a bunch of dust. Okay? But yet, they got together, they formed atoms, and then the atoms got together and formed bigger particles, and then the galaxies formed and everything. Well, there should be nothing but chaos. What's the answer? The answer is God. Okay? So, and if you've noticed how much order there is in the universe, it's another miracle of science. There should be things running around bashing into each other all the time. But it's a very orderly universe. I mean, everything moves in the same pattern. We know exactly how long it's going to take for the moon to go around the Earth, for the Earth to go around the sun, for us to revolve on our axis, for all the other planets. They're all following the same pattern, and it's just beautiful, and that is not an accident. That is God. Okay. In the song, So Will I. And as you speak, 100 billion galaxies are born. In the vapor of your breath, the planets form. Yes. And then even more so, I think, is the miracle we call life. Because I was sort of forced into teaching physics and, the space science and all that, but my calling was really in biology. I was so fascinated by the way everything worked together in life. You start with the fact that life does adapt and change as the environment changes. And that's called the theory of evolution. And that is actually proof of God. It's proof of God. He made it so perfect that things could continue and last. There's this stuff called DNA, right? Super simple and yet super complex. It's made out of 6 basic parts, same in every single creature, from a bacteria to an elephant to a human being. It's the same little parts, okay? And yet how they're put together determines, is it going to be a cow? Is it going to be a pig? Is it going to be me? Have you ever thought, no, seriously, have you ever thought about when you eat a Big Mac or the steak you love to eat, how come you don't turn into a cow? Okay? And it's because it's made of the same basic parts, protein pieces called amino acids. Your body breaks them down, but your DNA is your DNA, and it says, no, don't make Sam a cow. Make him more human muscle, because he'd look pretty stupid, God has this incredible plan, and it works, it works. Okay? Another line from the song we just heard, and as you speak, 100 billion creatures catch your breath, evolving in pursuit of what you said. That's God's plan. It was no accident, okay? Another thing that I love is anomalies. These are things that cannot be explained by science, okay? There's something called a bee dance. How many of you have heard of the bee dance? Okay, the guys that studied this won a Nobel Prize for figuring this out. Now, bee, it's a little tiny creature with a little tiny, doesn't even call it a brain. It can sense colors and it can sense smell, okay? Well, these little bees, they'll send scouts out, and the scouts may go a mile or more. Pardon, I've got fog breath. It is. But anyway, and they find a patch of flowers, and then they make a beeline back to the hive. And when they get there, all the other bees gather around, and this little bee does this funny little dance. And his dance, they found, was relative to what angle that flower patch was according to where the sun is right now. So if it's over there and the sun's here, it'll go like that. And that tells all the other bees, go that way. And then how many times it goes up and down is exactly measured to how far away it is. I forget what it was in meters. And then, not even that, if it's a really good patch, it'll wiggle really fast. And if it's not such a good patch, kind of, okay? Now, does he lead them back to it? Oh, heck no. I'm tired. I've done my thing. I've got a load of pollen here to get rid of. I'm taking a nap. You go find it, and they will. They take off without that bee and go exactly directly to that patch without making an error. How can they do that? They don't have a brain. That's very complex thinking, very complex understanding. That's God. That's God. Another one, just one more example, is like hummingbirds. Okay. Science says hummingbirds can go about 10 minutes without eating and drop dead. Their metabolism's that high. And yet, they also migrate 2,000 miles across the Gulf of Mexico every year where there's not a flower in sight. Go figure. That's God, okay? I went this one time. Scientists have been trying for 50, 60 years to prove that life could have created itself in the early seas, that it just was a chemical accident, they call it. So I went to this symposium at UCLA. This was back when I was in California teaching high school. And I went just because it was going to be all the greatest scientists from all over the world to talk about all the research they'd done on this subject. Now they had all these little perfect labs with all the perfect setups, the perfect chemicals, everything exact, DNA, computers, all this kind of thing. And tried it. How many thousands of experiments, God alone knows, and never were able to make more than a few little pieces of protein, tiniest pieces, a few little strands of DNA. Never even came close to something resembling the simplest possible bacteria cell. So these guys were all talking about their stuff, and I'm listening, and then there's a question and answer period. Well, I'm like the nerd at the back of the room, right? They're ignoring me because obviously I'm not a scientist. It's like, finally the moderator, he goes, "Yes, miss, what is it?" I go, "Is anybody trying to synthesize chlorophyll?" Now, the reason I ask this is because without chlorophyll, you can't have photosynthesis. Without photosynthesis, there's no oxygen. Without oxygen on the planet, no other life can exist, and everything breaks apart because there's no ozone layer. Well, he acted like I was real dummy. And he gave me, and looks at the panel and goes, and they go, and he goes, "No." So I shrink back down in my seat. And then as I'm leaving a short time later, there's this group of older Big Bang Theory types who call me, Miss. I go, "Yeah?" And they go, "Actually, that was a really good question. We've been trying to do that for the past 20 years, and we have had absolutely no success. Chlorophyll is way too fragile. It could never self-assimilate." Well, there goes the whole theory of, chemical accident. Because God did it. So anyway, a couple months back, I was listening to NPR, and they were having some kind of talk, and they mentioned something about a parallel universe made of nothing but music. Okay? And I thought it was really interesting. He said, musicians will tap into this. Every song ever written, everything that could be written is there, and they just tap into it. I thought, well, that's really rather beautiful. And then it was a few days later, and God said, "Listen for music." It's out of the blue. I wasn't praying. I was just driving. And, well, God, when he speaks to me, is very succinct, unlike me. He doesn't, it's not like a voice up here, big, heavy thing. It's kind of like a little voice back here, not even quite a voice. It's just like, okay, listen for music. Where? In everything? So I started to listen. And, some music is pretty easy to hear, like the winds in the trees or waves crashing, barking dogs, the guy with his bass up to, as loud as it can be, shaking your house at 1 o'clock in the morning as he drives by. You can hear those, but there's a lot of things you don't hear. You may never really be able to hear with your ears, like the air in this room bouncing around. There's trillions upon trillions of molecules hitting each other right now, bouncing. We don't really hear that, okay? Doesn't mean it's not there. Any movement there is creates a sound, and that sound is music. So, I don't want to get overtime, so anyway, you get the point. There's lots of sounds of plants growing, the sounds of little creatures in the reef when they're hiding from the waves, all kinds of sounds that we don't really hear. But they're all there. And as the song said, if creation sings your praises, so will I. I think all the sounds they're making are sounds of praise. In church, we know that whenever we do sing, when we sing our songs of praise like today, we're invited right into God's presence. And that's kind of what I feel heaven. That's God's presence, and it's somehow miraculously music takes us there every time. And we can remember it even when we go back out into the mundane world. We remember that, okay? And to me, it's what Jesus was talking about when he said in John 10:9. And Jesus said, "I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture." And that's what I feel we do when we come here. We go in and we stay a while. We come out, but we remember that. So, next page. oh. And Paul, in Ephesians 5:19, he said, "Speak to one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, offering praise by singing and making melody with your heart to the Lord." So it must be really important, okay? But why? How do songs and music get us into God's presence? We know they do, but how come? One thought is that it said God is both immanent and transcendent. Okay, he's in us, he's in all his creations, and he's also beyond. Okay? So perhaps the answer is that music connects the God within us to the God beyond. There's something called Harmony of the Spheres. It was written by this Greek mathematician, Pythagoras, 2,500 years ago. Now, he was just a mathematician, and he studied the stars and everything. But what he said was that the sun, the moon, and planet all emit their own unique harmonies based on their orbital revolutions, their movements relative to each other. He believed the quality of life on Earth reflects these celestial sounds, but they're sounds which are imperceptible to the human ears. Okay, so everything's moving. It's through movement, it's making sounds. The different planets are different sizes. They're all in harmony. In the movie Alien, they said, in space, no one can hear you scream. Well, to me, well, sound can't travel through a vacuum. So our ears can't pick that up. That doesn't mean our spiritual ears cannot. Okay? So listen for music then with your spirit, not just your ears. Okay, so then I Googled musical universe just to see what it said there. And I was surprised to find there was many, many, many great thinkers throughout the ages that believed in a connection between the human soul and the music of the universe. Beethoven, one of the world's greatest composers, said, "Music is the mediator between the life of the senses and the life of the spirit." Wow. Okay, so what did he mean by the life of the senses? Well, if you think about it, our senses tell us what is. You know, we get the light waves come in, they register in the eyes, a nerve message sent back to the brain at the back flips it over, sends it back to the cortex. You go, "Oh yeah, that's Donna." "Oh yeah, those are pretty lights." But it's really in here. It's all interpreted inside from your senses, and ears, taste, everything comes through your senses, and your mind figures out what it is and creates that world. That's the world of the senses. So, what's the life of the spirit he's talking about then when he says music is the mediator, meaning the go-between between the life of the senses and the life of the spirit? The spirit's outside the world of the senses. It's the eternal self. It has no time, no place, no form, and it's outside the physical universe. So what I think Beethoven is saying is that through music, through the senses picking up music, hearing and feeling the harmonies and melodies and beats and rhythms, we somehow connect to the spiritual part of the universe, and thus to God. There's these other writers, too, that have some of the same things. This lady called Corinne Helene, she was a Christian mystic who died in 1975. She wrote, "By harmony, all phenomena are formed and sustained. And there's a scientific statement to the effect that this earth is a vast harmonic wave system that's built and sustained by unheard music." And that's very similar to what Pythagoras then said, which is, each celestial body, in fact, each and every atom, produces a particular sound on account of its movement, its rhythm or vibration. All these sounds and vibrations form a universal harmony, which in each element, while have its own function and character, contributes to the whole. Just the atoms themselves, and there's different types of atoms, they all have a different sound. The moon and the stars and everything has a different sound, and it's this incredible symphony. Try to imagine for just a minute what a wonderful, amazing symphony the universe around us is. Okay. As it said in the song, "If the stars were made to worship, so will I." So now, what does this compare with what's said in the Bible? Because I can't get to the next page. Prophet Isaiah 49:13. Shout for joy, O heavens, and rejoice, O earth, and break forth into singing, O mountains. For the Lord has comforted his people and will have compassion on his afflicted. Break into singing, O mountains. Shout for joy, O heavens and earth. Isn't this a way of saying these celestial bodies have sounds and vibrations, rhythms and harmonies? And isn't that also like what David wrote when he says, and this is Psalm 98, verse 7 and 8, let the sea thunder and roar, and all the things it contains. Let the world and those who dwell in it. Let the rivers clap their hands. Let the mountains sing together for joy and delight. Are these just poetic metaphors, or are they to be taken literally? Do all the things God has created have a music, a rhythm, and a harmony? I hope I'm not running out of time. I'm getting the best part. Okay. So, this thing about atoms, they originally thought that atoms were the smallest thing there are. I remember reading, back when I was teaching about it, there are more atoms in one grain of sand, picture one grain of sand, than all the leaves on all the trees in the entire world. That's how tiny atoms are. And yet, we found that they're not a single solid thing. They put them in this thing called a particle accelerator, which is, a couple of miles distance, and they make them go faster and faster and faster and faster until they're almost at the speed of light, and then they smash them against a plate. And lo and behold, they're made of a whole bunch of littler particles. So tiny that they're almost like nothing at all, nothing but energy. Nothing but energy and their opposite charges. So everything's made of these same basic parts. They also follow the same pattern like the larger universe. Electrons circle the center just like our moon circles the earth. Okay? Only they're going at something close to the speed of light. And they say that if the center of the atom was the size of a ping pong ball, the electron is about 2 or 3 blocks away. So most of an atom is empty space. It's just energy. And all the energy has a sound. Even these little atoms whirring and spinning and bumping each other, all are making a little sound. Even the rocks that sit in apparent silence would have sound then. So like the song said, if the rocks cry out in silence, so will I. Psalm 98:4 says, shout for joy to the Lord, all the earth, burst into jubilant song with music. And this idea is echoed in the words of this 19th century Italian writer, Giuseppe Mazzini. He says, music is the harmonious voice of creation, an echo of the invisible world, one note of the divine, that the entire universe is destined one day to sound. Another man, Thomas Carlyle, 19th century Scottish essayist, said, see deep enough and you see musically the heart of nature being everywhere music. So throughout history, Christians, Sufis, men, women, philosophers are all finding the same truth. The Sufi philosopher and poet Hafiz in the 14th century wrote, people say that the soul, on hearing the song of creation, entered the body, but in reality the soul itself was the song. The soul itself was the song, the part of you that connects the physical self to the spiritual self is the song. Another Sufi master said, what makes us feel drawn to music is the way our whole being is music. Our mind and body, the nature in which we live, the nature which has made us, all that is beneath and around us, it is all music. Well, listen to what King David said in Psalm 108. My heart, O God, is steadfast. I will sing and make music with all my soul. Our whole being is music. The soul itself was the song. See, even David says that. Now, this next quote, another one from this Corinne Helene, though, gave me a whole another little path to follow. When she said, man is a musical being, his origin is in the spoken word. I went, word. Wait a minute. I dig up my Bible. I start looking. Its origin is in the spoken word. Remember, I started this message saying I don't want to drop things. I want to discover why it is when we sing songs of praise and worship, we enter into the presence of God. Back to John 10:9, Jesus said, I am the gate. Whoever enters through me will be saved. They will come in and go out and find pasture. And I said today's message was the sound of light. So here we go. In Genesis 1:1-3, it says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth, and God said, let there be light, and there was light. But in John 1:1 it says, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was with God in the beginning. Through him all things were made, and without him nothing was made that has been made. In him was life, and that life was the light of all mankind. Which version is true? Well, of course, they both are. Okay? So in the beginning, God, through the Word, which was who we now call Jesus, created the heavens and the earth. God said, let there be light. And Jesus is that light, the light of all mankind. John 3:19 says, light has come into the world, in referring to Jesus. And in 8:12, Jesus affirms this, saying, I am the light of the world. So how do we tie this all together? How do we answer the question, how does music connect us with the divine, with Jesus and the Holy Spirit and with God? We acknowledge that Jesus is the light and the Word of God, and that when we sing, we connect to that light, and through that light, connect to God, both transcendent and immanent. We sing to enter his realm, heaven, through the gate, Jesus. So let's go through this again. If Jesus is the light and the Word, and is as well the gate to heaven, and if we find we can enter that gate through music, through becoming one with music, then the light must be music, and the gate must be music, and Jesus must also be music. So what is the sound of light? It's Jesus, the Lord our God. His word is music, his light is music, his essence is music, and all his creation is music, and we are music. God told me, listen for music, but he is the music I listen for. He's in all creation. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. What's the take-home message? Sing. Even when your heart's breaking and the words choke up in your throat, sing anyway, and sing harder and sing louder. Sing to enter God's realm, sing to find peace, sing to connect with the divine. No matter how you feel or what is going on in your life, sing. And let all your prayers be songs of praise. For if all creation is made of music, singing praises to its creator will connect you to the creation and to the creator himself. It's a beautiful gate. You'll find peace and love in God within. Listen for music.